And good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the 13th annual Wild Wisconsin Winter Web Conference. I'm Jamie, there we go. I'm Jamie Machek with the Wisconsin Valley Library Service. And assisting me today in the management track is Leah Laneby, who is with the IFLIS Library System. We had a great session at 10:30. And for this session, we have Megan Kowalski. And Megan is the Outreach and Reference Librarian at the University of the District of Columbia. And Megan's going to be talking about ditching harmful management tactics, and she will be taking questions primarily at the end of the presentation. So Megan, whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you so much. First, I want to say thank you for having me today. I hear that DC right now is colder than Wisconsin, which is kind of a surprise, but my in-laws in Myrtle Beach got 4 inches of snow, so that's even more of a surprise. I want to say the entire premise of this presentation is that bad management is bad and we need to call it out as such. And saying something is bad is not necessarily a bad thing, as long as we do that with the intent to improve. Thank you, Jamie, for the intro. I do want to note that I no longer work directly in management, but you don't need to be a manager to benefit from learning this information because in some ways we are all managers. We all work with people. We manage our own office or something of that sort. Some of us might have student employees, so we are all managers. I currently work in public services, but I have worked in both public and technical services. And in previous positions, I helmed a team of up to 20 part-time students, and in another, I had 6 full-time employees. I also want to call out my privilege as a white cisgendered woman working in a profession that is mostly white cisgendered women. I can speak about these things, saying bad management is bad without fear of retribution. In fact, my boss thinks this presentation is fantastic. That's not the case for many others, either based on who they are or the role they lead within their profession. But bad management hurts everyone, but it especially harms those who are already marginalized. So that is why we need to pay attention to these things as we work. So before we jump into this presentation, I want everyone to take a deep breath, maybe more than one. I am going to say some hard truths. You will recognize yourself. You may be upset. You may feel defensive. That's okay. We've all been bad managers at times. If you are recognizing yourself here, that means you are self-aware, and that is a fantastic skill to have. I also have had good managers. I've had great managers, and I've had some awful managers. I've also been both a good and a bad manager. We can be both of these things at the same time. So just take a deep breath as we move forward. It is okay if you feel a little bit like, ooh, yeah, that's me, and it's not good. So first, I want to, ask you, what do you hate about management? What is the bad thing, the one bad management piece that irks you the most? And I'm dropping a link in the chat. You can also use the QR code on the screen. I'm going to leave it up for a few seconds to give people a chance to start before I pop over to this Padlet. Just what's the first thing that comes to mind? What is the one bad management technique that you cannot stand? All right, leave that open for a few more seconds.
All right, so as Megan said, you can either use the link that is in the chat, copy and paste it in your browser, or you can pull up your camera up to the QR code, and that should take you to the Padlet.
Now I'm going to just leave it open for a few more seconds. Jump over to the Padlet. Micromanaging, bullying. Yes, micromanaging is the number one thing. And I'm seeing some come into the chat. Budgets, yeah. Money is the be all and end all sometimes. Untrustworthiness, feedback with nothing to back it up. Yes. I have done this presentation or a variation of it once before, and it still carries over. I did that presentation, I believe, 3 or 4 years ago. And yes, micromanagement, untrustworthiness, unrealistic expectations, all of that came up before. Yes. Not listening to employees, yelling, mean, passing the buck, lack of feedback from above and below. Oh, I have a whole slide on that at the end. Okay, lack of compassion, confrontation, yes. Okay, great. This is, I'm just going to say, none of this is a surprise. None of this is a shock. These are all classic signs of bad management. Also coming in the chat, gossip and bad morale. Okay. Jumping back over to the slides. Next one is, why do you hate that specific aspect of bad management? I'm going to drop the link to the chat. Drop a link in the chat for that one as well. So for that first item that you shared, why do you hate it? And the reason I'm asking this is to get at the core of the problem. It's not always the action itself, it's the why behind it is what makes us so upset about it. So I'll leave the QR code up. The link is in the chat. It shows a lack of trust in one's staff, unprofessional and lack of etiquette, uncomfortable with confrontation. Yes, lack of transparency, trust. Mean people are bullies. That doesn't help anyone. Unprofessional. I don't feel trusted. Mean-spirited. Lack of accountability. Yeah. So the reason I start with this exercise is to just recognize that we all know bad management when we see it, and we know why it bugs us. And so that's important to note as we start to do the work of improving management within our organizations. So these Padlets will stay open for a few days. If you feel the need to vent, that's fine by me. I've definitely seen it all before. So I'm going to enter the full screen again. All right. So how does this happen? How do we get to bad management? Well, simply put, we don't provide leadership training. And you'll notice different word there, leadership versus management. And this is just a general rule, but I've found it's particularly true in libraries. So think about your role or your library. Did you ever receive any comprehensive management or leadership training? Likely the answer is no. My husband works for a much bigger company than my library or any of the libraries I've ever worked in, and he has been in management for a while and only just received leadership training a year ago. This is common across all industries, but I've noticed it's particularly noticeable in libraries. And so today we're going to look at the two main categories of bad management, and they come down to they're both systemic and personal. There is some crossover because you generally cannot have one without the other. So systemic bad management is built into how organizations operate. It is cultural and pervasive, and bad management may actually be constructed into the workflows and procedures of a particular organization. Personal bad management, on the other hand, tends to be tied to individual managers. It could be a learned behavior, or it may be a reaction to the system that person is in. And the individual who is considered the bad manager may actually be oblivious to what they are working on. And so oftentimes people can't see that they are bad managers in the moment. They might recognize it later, but sometimes they're just oblivious to what is happening. And that's partly why they are a bad manager. So first, we're going to start at looking at systemic bad management. And this is because bad systems allow bad management and bad management tactics to grow and fester. So first things first, the one that comes up the most often is micromanagement. And this is a pattern of manager behavior marked by excessive supervision and control of employees' work and processes. Micromanagement can also be noted that it comes with limited delegation of tasks or decisions to staff, meaning the manager holds on to quite a bit. And so why does this happen? Well, first, it comes from a place of fear and distrust. You know, micromanagement happens because that manager just doesn't have the trust in their team, or they fear that what needs to get done is not going to get done. It may also come from a lack of knowledge. You know, that manager is not aware of new techniques or new trends or new happenings within that organization. It can also come from an inflated sense of ego. You know, that manager thinking, I can do it better. But it may also come from an inability to give up past roles in an organization. This is particularly true of managers who've been promoted within, you know, a specific silo or a department where they feel they need to hold on to their previous position. And the reason this is a problem is, well, one, it's just plain annoying. You know, you feel like you're being treated like a kid. You know, you don't want to have someone, you know, telling you what to do all day. It also tells people, particularly those underneath this manager, that that manager does not trust them or think they have the skills and capabilities to get the work done. And that gives the aura that these employees, end up feeling powerless or ineffective in their roles, and it creates an overall atmosphere of fear. The next poor management tactic is monitoring, and this can be electronic or in person. And in general, this did get worse under COVID. And it's essentially using systems to constantly track the work of employees or asking employees to quote unquote prove that they are working. An example I have here actually predates computers. It is from one of my old organizations in a cataloging department that no longer exists. But at that time, one of my former colleagues working in that cataloging department, anytime they wanted to leave their desk for any reason whatsoever, even if it was simply to go to the bathroom, they had to fill out a note card in a specific way and leave it on the desk, just in case their manager happened to walk by and they were not at the desk. And if this employee was going to the bathroom and forgot to fill out that card, they would be reprimanded. Like, that is the kind of monitoring that can happen even in pre-computer systems. This day it's easy. A lot of times some managers say, hey, keep your camera on at all times or be on chat at all times. If you're in Microsoft Teams, I've heard stories of people who just wiggle their mouse to keep their little light green at all times to show that they are working. And so why this happens is, again, out of distrust and fear. Most of bad management comes from those two things. It's also a systemic issue around the idea of productivity over people, coming down with there are requirements jobs have to do, and these requirements are coming down. So then the manager is like, no, you have to do things exactly as I say when I say it. So I'm going to put it in these monitoring systems. It's also from this outdated sense of entitlement. Back in the day before computers, your bosses knew you were working because you were in the office and you were doing things sitting in a chair. And there's this idea that your organization owns you for the hours of 9 to 5 or whatever your clock time is. And that's an outdated sense of entitlement that can cause this. And why is this a problem? Well, first, it's racist, particularly those electronic systems that don't see different skin colors as recognizable. I work in an academic university, and some of the students here at our HBCU, when they're using a particular software platform, have to show the room they are in and where they are sitting. And they have since discovered they need like 6 lamps blaring in their face so the system actually sees them as existing. This is also a problem because it's an invasion of privacy. People have personal lives and health issues that you have no business prying into. As an example of this, I once had a former supervisor ask me where I was going, and I had it with that sort of monitoring, and I held up a tampon because, well, guess what? You're asking me, you're going to get a real answer. This kind of monitoring also does not allow for flexibility of life. Stuff happens, and you need to recognize that life happens. And so monitoring doesn't allow for life happening. Many of us have kids, and every time a school calls, we got to drop and go pick up our kid if they're suddenly running a fever and things like that. It also turns people into automatons and does not allow for different styles of work. Some people work best in productivity bursts. Others work on a more slow and consistent model, but monitoring basically forces you into one kind of workflow. One of the major concerns with this is that it also lowers morale. It also reduces the ability of people to be creative and innovative because they're going to be punished by an existing system. And it can also give a false sense of security to the manager. People will find a way around this, particularly for electronic monitoring. I have heard stories of people tying their computer mouse to their dog, so it's moving all the time, even if they're not working. Next bad management technique is disorganization. And this comes down to a lack of planning and project management. Work ends up being asked for out of order, or at the last minute, everything becomes a rush. And this usually comes with limited documentation, training, checklists, policies, and procedures for people to fall back on. And it's generally unclear what the goals and priorities of a specific department or organization are. And the reason this happens is generally from a lack of strategic vision or presetting of goals and expectations. It also assumes, that manager tends to assume that, the employees know what they want or know what they mean. And it can also come from too many ideas and not enough strategic thinking. It's great when people come up with ideas, but if you just throw everything out there without setting priorities, that disorganization can cause a lot of chaos within a department. And the reason this is a problem is it's reigning by chaos and then blaming the team when things go wrong. People don't know what they should be working on, why they should be working on it, or the importance or overall vision of how these things fit within a project or a greater organization. It also turns most projects into rush jobs with constantly changing expectations, which reduces the quality of the work. Essentially, disorganization turns everything into a crisis and forces everyone to work within a heightened level of energy that can really reduce the quality of their work and how they feel about their work. Next is too many meetings. This is self-explanatory and just leads to people with loaded calendars with limited time to do actual work. And the reason this happens is it mostly comes out of wanting a sense of control, thinking that meetings are where collaboration and productivity happen, and it's really cultural. A lot of this is cultural, and it got worse under COVID. A lot of people think we need to fix it. Let's put a meeting on our calendar. Why is this a problem? I just noticed, did I miss 4? No, you did not. I'm just now realizing I got my numbers out of order. So 4 will be next. Why is this a problem? Well, 1, it got worse under COVID. And 2, we tend to have too many meetings in general, or we don't have the right people in attendance at those meetings. And meetings do not equal productivity. They just eat into everyone's actual work time. Meetings are rarely where work gets done. And it also reinforces existing work relationships. The same people tend to talk and contribute within these meetings, which creates these power structures that permeate the rest of the work. And I apologize for the numbering. I must have accidentally flipped the sign. So here's 4. So busy work. It's having staff do things just because. The work does not necessarily contribute to the overall goals, or the work itself has little value in and of itself. It also just may be work to make it seem like work is being done. And why does this happen? Well, 1, fear. People feel like if work is suddenly, there's a slow time, then suddenly people are not working hard enough. It's also, again, wanting proof of work. And again, that sense of entitlement, do things, as I ask, when I ask, do it now. And so why is this a problem? Well, just because stuff is happening doesn't mean it's productive. Busy work tends to put volume over actual effectiveness, and it reduces critical thinking and creativity because, again, it forces people to do mundane things that might actually not have a big impact on the work that is supposed to be done. And it reduces the connection to the work in the organizational goals, and this misplaces priorities because generating work does not necessarily mean things are effective. And related to this is overwork. And this is asking staff to do more than can be reasonably completed within established working hours. It's asking staff to work during their personal time or when they are on leave. And this is almost always without additional compensation. And so busy work can contribute to overwork. And so why does this happen? Well, first, sometimes there really is just too much work and not enough people or hours in the day. And the manager may also be trying to impress their boss or the people over them. It can also be not understanding people's lives and priorities. If managers don't know what is going on in their employees' lives, they might be able to think, oh, you can take on more when that person is feeling incredibly overburdened. It's also, again, a form of entitlement that's basically said, I hired you, now do my bidding. And this is a problem because, number 1, it leads to burnout. And it creates a negative work environment and resentment that just cascades. People know when overwork is happening, you will see it. People will literally physically look different when they're in the office. You can tell when overwork is happening and people are tired. So now we're moving on to personal bad management tactics. So in good systems, individual bad managers stick out. In bad systems, individual bad managers may actually be rewarded because they're following those systems that exist. So first is lack of communication and responsiveness. Essentially anything that needs to be communicated, whether it's standards, goals, policies, procedures, whatnot, is actually not communicated, or if it is communicated, it's not done so in a timely manner. Things are rushed at the last minute or incomplete. If people have responses to questions or concerns or ideas, a bad manager will ignore those or delay their response to the point of uselessness. And so why does this happen? Well, it usually occurs to, protect power. People think you can't do anything until I tell you. And so they wait till the last minute. It can also happen because an individual manager might be trying to hide their personal lack of knowledge or skills. It's also, those individual managers might be assuming that the people who work for them know what needs to be done or what stuff will happen. It can also come from disinterest and coasting. They're not interested in their job, so they don't really care to respond. And why is this a problem? Well, first, it leaves teams hanging and makes it really hard for people to get their work done. It also makes the goals of projects unclear. Why should we be working on this if you're not going to communicate the reason behind it? It means expectations are not being set, or if they are being set, they're not being shared. And then people struggle to meet whatever those expectations are because they don't know. And it means no feedback on work or projects, which makes it hard for people to improve and complete their work. Another individual bad management technique is silo protecting. And this is when a manager stakes a claim or an area of interest or does not let anything inside or out of their specific silos. It's essentially a manager saying, mine, this is all I care about. And so why this happens is it's creating zones of power, essentially to rule by fiefdom, but someone's wanting a sense of power over something. It can also come from the idea of, well, that's not my job, I'm not going to worry about it. And this is a problem because it reduces collaboration and overall cohesiveness within an organization. And it tends to put tradition over innovation because it reduces idea sharing between departments or between people. And in some instances, it can pit various teams against one another because they feel like they have to compete for resources or attention. And then there's the dreaded, oh, but this is how it's always been done. And it's essentially the inability to change and adapt. So why does this happen? Again, coming back to fear. People tend to fear the unknown, they fear change. It also means there might be a lack of insight or a simple ignorance of, change happening within a work or industry. In libraries, I can think there are some people, I'm not one of them, but some people who are incredibly gung-ho about AI and others who full head in the sand, they're like, AI is not a thing that is happening. And so there's this resistance to change. And it can also be from a form of power protection where the people are like, no, it's my way or the highway. And that can happen particularly with managers who are like, no, this is how it's always been done. This is how we're always going to do it. And why is this a problem? Well, first, you miss out on good ideas and innovation. It also puts systems over people and general progress in general for an industry. And it forces people to do what you would do and not allowing them to work how they work best. And next is indecisiveness. And this is the inability to make or communicate decisions. And this happens because people don't want to be the bad guy. I'm a big fan of the show The Office, and Michael Scott is the quintessential indecisive manager because he never wanted to be the bad guy. It's also people have a fear of being afraid or being wrong, and there might be a fear of failure. And generally, it just comes back to risk avoidance. If you're indecisive and don't make a decision, well, you've avoided all risk, which isn't true, but that's what people tend to think. And this is a problem because it holds up work in general. Indecisiveness delays things, turns everything into a crisis. It also creates a culture where the fear of failure and the fear of mistakes is not tolerated. Essentially, people feel like they're going to be punished if they get something wrong. Another bad management tactic that you tend to see on the individual level is gamesmanship. And this is pitting people against one another or playing favorites. And this happens because generally that manager is putting the self over the needs of the team or the greater organization. And more often than not, it's just simply a power move. And they think they need to lead by fear to gain loyalty. And so the people who tend to do what they want, the teacher's pets, tend to be preferred. And this is a problem because it divides teams. It creates an environment of competition and distrust, and it makes people fight for resources and attention, and it really explodes office politics, which, while some people enjoy it, most people do not. Next is insensitivity, and this is a lack of empathy for people as individuals. It's a lack of respect for a person's, personal life or concerns, and it sometimes just comes across as being plain rude, mean, and dismissive. And this happens for a few reasons. It's, again, fear, that work won't get done if you tend to treat people as people. It also can result out of unrealistic expectations, following the example of what is seen elsewhere. So, like, oh, if it worked there, it'll work here. And you're not necessarily thinking of the people on your team. Your team is different from the team where this worked. It's also expecting employees to be exactly like you. And it's not understanding the needs of the individuals on a team. Everyone is different, and good managers recognize that. So, why is this a problem? Well, it creates a negative and unpleasant work environment, and it turns people into machine cogs, and that's just unpleasant. It's also not realistic with life. We all have lives outside of the office, and we need to respect that. And it's just simply not working with people as individuals. And so all of these bad management techniques tend to come from similar themes. So, as I mentioned multiple times, distrust. You're not trusting individuals, or you're not trusting good systems and workflows. It also comes from power protection. People stake a claim on something and they don't want to give it up or change, and this can lead to ego trips. It also can come from a sense of entitlement. I hired you, do what I say, or I am the manager, you are beneath me. It's setting up that strict hierarchy. It can also, this entitlement can come from the idea of I've been promoted to manager, I've earned this. It can lead to the mentality of I survived bad management, so can you. Again, it comes from fear and uncertainty. People use these techniques to cover up from their own personal uncertainty or their personal lack of skills and knowledge, or they might fear that they have this anxiety over a loss of control or their own position. It can come from a lack of communication. Some people are just bad at communicating, or they communicate in ways that do not work for their team. It can also come from a lack of structure to provide complete and timely communication. And finally, a lot of this comes from the unwillingness to change. Some people just want things to stay the way they are, or they have the inability to see why change would help. And bad management damages individuals, teams, and organizations. First, it lowers morale. It makes it harder for people to do the work. Why would people want to keep coming back to an office that does not respect them? It creates almost a sense of pointlessness to a job. And you're in a bad position when you have those intense Sunday scaries, except really bad management means it's Sunday scaries all the time. And this can create a workplace trauma. There's fear of retaliation. There's fear that you're not allowed to innovate. A lot of this is wrapped up in microaggressions. And this heightened environment leads to more anxiety, more stress, and more conflict. And this ongoing emotional damage can compound over time, and you see it the longer the bad management goes on. And this can lead to task avoidance, lack of motivation, and absenteeism in really bad environments. And this can lead to slower productivity. It removes the why of what people do and their motivation to get work done. They think if you're going to disrespect me or not value my contributions, why should I do more than the bare minimum? And people use this as revenge for how they are treated. We did hear about quiet quitting a lot. And this can also stymie innovation. It creates an environment where innovation is not valued or there's no reward for doing better. It can also reduce engagement over time. Employees disconnect when they are not respected or they feel that their work is not valued. And again, it leads to people feeling like cogs in a machine instead of individual people with individual needs. And this can create a loss of connection between the work and the greater organization. Bad management can also create a lack of teamwork because it places individual selves over teams, and it can lead people to protecting their jobs and position above all else. And, why collaborate if it doesn't lead to anything? You might have a great team that wants to collaborate all the time, but if you don't let them, you're going to lose out on that. And it leads to people throwing others under the bus. Again, they feel the need to protect themselves. And this can in turn lead to high employee turnover. People don't leave jobs, they leave bad managers and bad management. No one wants to be disrespected or know that their work is not valued. So why would you continue to work in an organization that actively hurts you? And another issue is that it minoritizes the already marginalized. The burden of bad management is always worse on marginalized communities because it reinforces inherent biases. It also reinforces existing double standards, and that compounded fear of stereotypes and prejudice even further compound that workplace trauma, and the mental load can become overwhelming and impact the work being done. And so why does this happen? Well, first, there's an actual thing called the Peter Principle. People are promoted for good work to their point of incompetence, and there they stay, ruining things. Good workers do not always make good managers. Promotions to management are not always the best way to reward success. Side note here, and something I'm constantly telling people, just pay people more for when they're awesome at what they do. They don't necessarily need a promotion to be a manager. This also happens because of preferential treatment. Some workplaces pick favorites and reward those persons, even if that is detrimental to the organization as a whole. And we see this a lot in things like the tech industry, where, the certain image of a manager keeps getting promoted, even though that person is not great. It also rewards those who play office politics and not necessarily those who are the most competent. And I'll give you one guess who gets omitted here and who gets rewarded over others. It also rewards those who physically look the part. And again, this hurts minoritized communities more than anyone else. It also comes from a lack of assessment. There is no 360 assessment in badly managed organizations, and I'll get a little bit to that soon. It also means if there is assessment, it tends to be top down and not everyone is listened to, or you're disregarding what information is shared. It also comes from, bro culture or other culture of, well, that's how it's always been in this industry, so that's how it's always going to be. Industry set and reinforce cultural trends, and they just feed off of each other. And so if you don't break out of the system, that's how bad management gets rewarded. It also comes from the idea of hustle culture and the cult of productivity, where again, we put metrics over people. And it also the idea of, I had to endure it, now you do too. And you hear this a lot from people entering the industry, things like the legal profession, where they're putting in, 90-hour weeks because, well, that's what the person before them had to do. And so bad management is obvious, but the why behind it, why it is occurring is sometimes harder to figure out. And it may be systemic, or again, it may be individual. More often than not, it's a mix of the both. And so how can you fix bad management? You got to do the work. So first things first is a workplace audit. Do a workload evaluation. Is the problem overwork? Is the problem busy work? What work is actually getting done? Does it need to be there? Like actually sit down and think, okay, let's look at everything that's being done across the board. What are the turnover rates within your organization? Is it, do you have high turnover confined to one department? Or is it the entire organization? What are the engagement level of the employees? Are they active and willing to try new things? Do they care? Do they feel connected to the organization? There's also the idea of the vibe of an organization. How does it feel? Are people scared, worried, stressed, or are they happy and excited? That can tell you a lot. You can also do an external review. Go to places like X, LinkedIn, Glassdoor, Reddit, wherever your industry or your organization might be talked about, to see what people are saying about you. You can also do a journey or workflow mapping. And this is where you map out your workflows in people management of how things are actually being done. Not what, the manual says should be done, but how are things actually being done? Are steps being skipped? Are people being skirted around? What is the actual workflow? And you can identify roadblocks and dead ends and identify areas for improvement. You can also do surveys, and I always say these need to be ongoing and anonymous. You can also do exit interviews. When people leave, if they're willing to sit down, you can ask them a lot of questions to figure out why. You can also do stay interviews, and these are much rarer. Why are people sticking around? You may not like what you hear if someone said, I'm here because I need a paycheck. It's a completely legitimate answer, but it tells you a lot about an organization. So when it comes to doing a 360 evaluation and assessment, I'm seeing the stay interviews. Does anyone do these? Not enough. In my entire career, I've had one stay interview. And all of the work I've done, and I've been in libraries now for 25 years. It's much more known in other industries, but stay interviews are incredibly important. And so that slides into 360 evaluation and assessment. Everyone reviews up and down and occasionally side to side. If you are not having your staff review your managers, you are missing out on valuable information. I have made a printable for a example 360 assessment that you can do. I've dropped the link to that in the chat. Feel free to do with it what you will. You can also contact me afterwards and I am happy to email you a copy. And, 360 interviews mean you have for employees to assess the supervisor, for supervisors to assess the employees, and for colleagues to assess each other. This is not comprehensive. It's just to get you started. There are plenty of other 360 assessment questions online, and you can adapt this for how you need to do it. And these are important because it gives you a bigger review. Everyone seems to know the annual review of, okay, let's review the employees' work and see how they're doing for their race. But you really need to know how your managers are doing, and you're only going to hear from that by talking to their employees. At a previous university I was at, the library director, one of the deans would email random employees throughout the library and be like, okay, you are assessing the library director this year. And it was anonymous. Yes, the dean knew and the director did get the information, but it was never connected that the director never knew who was reviewing them. But he said he valued those because he got to learn where he needed to improve most and then what he was doing really well. He got both. You can also do a third-party review. And this can be important because the person doing a third-party review doesn't have a personal stake in what happens. They don't work there. They're going to come in, do the review and leave. Like there's no connection there. And that disconnect can make it easier for them to get a true evaluation. And sometimes people listen better to new voices. A third-party consultant comes in, you pay a lot of money for it, and suddenly you can be like, okay, they know what they're talking about. Sometimes that's just how it is. And this is why there are so many management consultants, because these third-party reviews can be incredibly useful. So now it's time to fix and recover. You don't have to be burdened with bad management forever. This is something you can learn and recover from. Because again, bad management happens all the time. Sometimes it's a little, sometimes it's a lot, but we can recover from all of it. So as a supervisor, sometimes you were the bad manager, sometimes you took over for a bad manager, sometimes it's both. Some of these processes are going to hurt a little bit. I did go through this. I know how it feels. So first, clarify. With your team, set the stage for improvement. Have a meeting where you mention you are going to do this to improve both as a manager and as an organization. You will not retaliate. You do not take it personally what you learn. You are there to improve and not to punish. You have to want it and you have to mean it. It's not worth doing this work if all you're going to do is be reactionary. Then you need to listen. Take bad reviews and feedback from a place of learning, not a place of judgment. This is where those techniques of surveys and assessment can come into play. And I mean really listen, not just in one ear and out the other. You actually have to sit down and listen to notice the trends, to notice what people are saying, and to notice what they're not saying. People can say a lot with their body language. And then you need to look, and this can be done at the same time as listening, but notice the physical cues. If you're walking around, do people immediately change their screen? Do they hide their body language? Do they physically leave the room when you walk in? That can matter. If you come across a group conversation, does the subject immediately change? That can tell you a lot. How does your team react when you're around, but also how does your office feel? Happy office tends to be pretty chatty and friendly. People who are in a bad work environment tend to come in feeling sad. And then you can recover. So ask what your team needs. And I say always do this as an anonymous option if you can. Google Forms are great for this because you can anonymize everything. Ask what your individuals need. Be open to hearing about past workplace traumas, but don't push. The more you do this work, the more people will begin to trust you and open up. And then you need to protect. You are an umbrella, not a sieve. You are there to protect your team. Put the person over productivity. Productivity comes from happy, comfortable, and engaged employees. It's not just metrics. And then you can atone if necessary. Apologize. Sometimes you do have to apologize. It's never a bad thing to admit when you're wrong. It makes it okay for others to make and recover from mistakes. You can also document the change in processes. So you can take what you've learned and said, okay, I've heard I need to work on this, this, and this. So here's what I'm going to do. Put it in writing, put it in a workflow, show how you are actually changing it, and then ask for honest assessment. Is this going to work? What do you think? Let's revisit in a month, see how things are working. And then set an example and lead. Lead the team, be in the trenches with them. If it's one of those days where things are chaotic, get down and do the work with them. Something as simple as that can go a long way. And then if you are just an individual dealing with bad management, what I'm going to talk about here is for help to recover from bad management, but some of it is going to be simply about protecting yourself. So first, keep evidence. In a worst case scenario, you can't get anything fixed unless you have proof. And that's, something simple there. You cannot recover if you don't have proof things are going wrong. So write down, what's going on, save documents, save emails if necessary, save voicemails, things like that. Then also consider writing down what you want. You have to know what you want to improve. So spend some time, journal, reflect, however that works for you, and figure out, well, what do you want to get out of this? Identify your allies, first for emotional support, and second, so you have a team there to help you document trends and circumstances. Because if there's a pattern of bad behavior, that's something you can go to if you need to, go above your manager or outside of your organization. If you find a higher ally, they may be able to help in this situation. In academic libraries, like where I work, this could be someone outside of the library because the library is a small, organization within a bigger umbrella organization. HR is supposed to be there to help fix these things, but that's not always the case. Honestly, HR is mostly there to protect the company from being sued and not to protect individual employees. That's the dirty secret of HR. So next, you also want to consider communicating to your direct supervisor, to a skip level supervisor, to HR. Sometimes change only comes if you directly ask for it. You also need to prepare to ask for better management like you would prepare to ask for a raise. Make the case, have a reason with proof. And I know I'm saying this from a place of privilege. You matter the most, but sometimes you just need to leave. Sometimes it is not worth putting your physical, mental health at risk for a bad organization. And again, people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad managers. So sometimes you do just have to consider leaving. So some closing thoughts here. Bad management exists in a system that allows it to grow and fester. We need to fix the system to fix bad managers. The Great Resignation and all this quiet quitting have shown that. People are leaving in droves because they hate the system, and there's a reason unions are making a comeback. And so it is important to do this work. It is hard work. It's kind of like in some ways ripping off a Band-Aid. It hurts in the moment, but it makes things better in the long run. And before I get to questions, I do want to note I'm happy to share these slides. I have a couple of resources that are worth listening to, a couple of newsletters, a couple of books, some websites and journals that are worth looking at. And so now I'm happy to answer any questions. I know I saw a few come up in the chat, but happy to take any questions you have. I am seeing we've done staff reviews, but some staff don't give constructive feedback and make their comments personal, even when directed not to. How do you avoid that? Part of me wants to ask why you want to avoid that. Again, I don't know your organization, so that does make a difference, but sometimes they're making it personal because they feel like they need to lash out because that's the only way they get attention. Sometimes you just need to give them a space to get the personal comments out and then get to the data you actually want. But the first thing I would ask is, in terms of making their comments personal, what do you mean? Like, is it a personal attack? Is it they're just bitter? It depends in the moment.
Thank you, Megan. And as Megan just mentioned, we have some time for questions. So you can submit those in the chat area to everybody. You can also submit them just by choosing hosts and panelists. You can also submit them anonymously in the Q&A. So don't worry about yourself being identified. You can submit questions anonymously, which is a nice feature. I do want to quickly mention when the webinar ends, you will get a survey that pops up on your screen. We've had some glitches with the titles of the survey. Just ignore that and fill it out. Your data will get to the correct place. So wanted to make you aware of that. So let's get to some questions. Megan answered one already. Megan, another one that came in this is when you were talking about micromanagement.
Mhm.
And this person says, I have the opposite problem to micromanaging, an absentee manager. Every time I ask for direction or instruction or bring up a problem, my manager turns it around on me under the guise of empowerment and development. And how would you address this?
So if I was in this position as the employee, the first thing I would do is ask, am I asking enough detail? You know, when I'm asking for direction, am I saying exactly what I want, or am I just saying, tell me more? That can be important simply because you can, some people, when you ask them, they just need more specific details. You know, when you say, I need direction on this, okay, well, what sort of direction do you need? There's also the issue of generally when there's an absentee manager, it's because either they don't care at all or they don't have enough information themselves and they don't want to show that they have this weakness. So sometimes it can be helpful if you're coming with a problem to be like, okay, this is the problem I have. This is the proposed solution I would like to have to that. Um, I have done that a few times, and it's one of those beg forgiveness later sort of situations. Again, it depends on the actual thing, but sometimes with absentee managers, you do have to do that skip level and be like, I need to go to someone above you because if you are truly well an absentee, there's a whole manner of reasons that could be happening. You know, are they in the office but a ghost? They're not actually doing anything? Are they just not paying attention at all? And the person above them might have an answer. You know, if I was the manager and I had been told, okay, I need more direction, I would simply have, a more standing meeting. Okay, how do you need to work? Like, how can I be a better manager for you? Would you like more meetings? Would you like things in writing? Would you like a walkthrough? You know, I would be asking, what particular thing can I do as a manager to make you more successful at your job? But with an absentee, sometimes you need to ask for more specific direction or give more specific direction, or you need to go above. Because sometimes the best way to fix bad management is to start working above to start getting the ball rolling.
Thank you. Another question is, our library board does a yearly evaluation for our library director. Is this as effective as having a staff review or a staff 360 evaluation? Because we work with her every day. What is an effective way to suggest something like this or suggest a change without seeming threatening?
Yeah. Sometimes you can just throw it off as simply as we think this would be cool to try. You know, we'd love to try something like this. We're making an overall organizational change. Generally, board reviews of directors, that's fairly typical, but the board is not working with that director day to day, every day, and they're definitely not being managed by that director.
Right.
So I would say try to identify one ally on the board because depending on how big the board is, generally there's going to be at least one person who'd be open to something like that. It can be useful to come up with research showing, we've heard great things about these 360 assessments. Look at these 3 articles, wouldn't this be interesting to try? There's probably one person on your team who's kind of that yappy little dog who doesn't mind being the one to be like, oh, let's try this. Get them to start doing some of this, put that skill to good use. And there's also, you can be like, okay, in a library of this size, we've noticed best practice. If you start throwing key terms around like that, best practice, according to the literature, industry standard, those tend to get the board's attention because they're thinking in terms of dollars and budget. And so saying something along the lines of, we think this would be the most effective use to improve the standing and yada, yada, those buzzwords tend to help.
Okay, thank you. Another question. Any tips for talking to your team about implementing 360 reviews?
So my favorite is to just be like, if you are the supervisor, to be like, I would like to try this. We're going to try it once, don't make it a pressure thing, be like, we're going to start with you, you reviewing me. Always start with that, them reviewing you. because it pretty much already exists that you review them. That's pretty standard. The side to side can be a little different. I would say put that off. If them reviewing you works really well, then you can do the side to side review, but keep those anonymous. It's like, okay, contact people separately. Say, I would like you to, review this person, or everybody. If your team's small enough, everybody reviews everybody. They get the feedback, but it gets anonymized first and things like that. So if you broach it with, that beta mindset of, we're just going to try it, see how it goes. And then afterwards say, okay, this is what I learned. Was that useful? Would we like to continue doing this? Make it a team event. Don't impose it. That's the biggest thing. 360 reviews work best if everyone was on board and it doesn't seem like I'm making you do this.
Thank you. Another question. You talked about insensitive management, but can you touch on overly sensitive management? I have a manager that's struggling to delegate and have difficult conversations, and I suspect it is for fear of making others uncomfortable and trying to spare feelings.
So this comes down to that whole Michael Scott, people are afraid. Sometimes this is where HR can be useful to be like, you can go to HR and be like, this is how things are working. This is how it's going. Might I suggest, this supervisor, this manager get additional training? That is actually something HR is good for, because HR will also go to that manager, and if they're doing their job right, they won't say where that feedback came from. Again, that really only works well in medium to larger organizations, simply because, if it's one employee to one manager, they're kind of going to know. But sometimes it can just be, some people are sensitive. I'm honestly thinking of my daughter right now, where everything to her feels like the world is falling apart. So sometimes it can simply being like having a conversation with them first, get to know them as people, make yourself a safe space, and just have a conversation. And then slowly over time that, things tend to open up and get a little stronger. But this is where one instance I would recommend possibly going to HR and just saying, hey, we think this would be useful training or something like that.
What do you do when you fear retaliation from bringing up management problems?
I would say the fear is warranted, but there are ways to stay anonymous. You can submit a letter in writing. Don't put your name on it, but literally print something out, and mail it to HR or mail it to the director or something. People forget the art of a written letter. So that's one way you can do it. There's also generally someone somewhere in the management structure knows things are a problem, and sometimes they're easy to identify, sometimes they're not. There's also, within bigger organizations, often feedback surveys go out that are anonymous. And, if they have those open, let us know what you think here. You can put in some information there as well. But if you are well and truly afraid of retaliation, I think the best route is to put it in writing in like a document, in an envelope, sealed, and either mailed in or slipped under a door, wherever it needs to go within your organization, because unless you put personal identifying information in that tends to be harder to track back. And I hope, it always depends on the organization. And, sometimes I say this can be useful to, if you have HR, you can go to HR. This is where, because again, HR is there to keep the company from being sued. They're going to be thinking, this person in front of me, I don't want them to sue us. And so that's where they'd be willing to work with you.
Thank you. From a slightly different perspective, do you have any resources for a 360 Board of Trustees review? And if
not,
okay, go ahead.
Not immediately available, but that is definitely something, Google is great for many things, and for finding various templates for 360 reviews. I can guarantee you there is a Board of Trustees ones out there. It might be for like a different industry and you'll have to tweak it slightly, but they do exist.
As management, there are some jobs that are mundane but needed. How do you make sure people feel valued in their work?
So I actually dealt with this directly. We, in my old library, we had a lot of these short ILL records clogging up our catalog and causing a lot of issues. And until we figured out a workaround, because that was part of my job, they had to be manually deleted. And the poor person doing that, that's all they did for one day a week was delete old ILL records. And it is mundane. And so first I thanked her profusely all the time. I also did some of the work myself so that they knew I get it. We're going through it. You can also parse these things out. So the mundane work, you only get stuck with a little bit of it at a time, but you can also put it within the greater picture of how it helps overall. So with those ILL records, I was like, look, our catalog is better now. Our catalog is cleaner. People can find things. They're not finding these short, outdated records that accidentally got added to the system. Show how it works within the bigger organization. So I always say in libraries, everything comes back to how does this impact the public? So while you may think I'm deleting barcodes, what's the point of this? What you're doing is making it so that our patrons are not finding incorrect records in the catalog. And so you can try to connect it to the greater mission of the organization. I mean, mundane work exists. We all have to do it sometimes. But if you connect it back to the why behind it and you can make that connection, that can really go a long way, along with a thank you.
Okay. How do you deal with a manager who does not practice what they preach?
Sometimes they simply don't know that. And this can be tough because the immediate response to when you're told you're not a good manager is to be defensive. I once had someone say to me, I don't like the way you communicate. And that's hard to hear.
Mm-hmm.
So I turned that around as they're telling me they don't like how I communicate. And I had to figure out, well, what is it? Is it the why? Is it I talk too much and I'm not emailing? So we had a conversation where we sat down and I was like, okay, I'm taking your feedback. Is it my tone? Is it how I come across? Is it I'm not communicating enough? And we sat there and we figured out that what this person wanted is they needed more one-on-one time, and then they needed takeaways. They needed takeaways in writing from all of our meetings. And so I only got that from meeting with this employee one-on-one. And back when I was a manager, I used to do quarterly meetings with my employees where I would ask 5 questions. I actually have a book chapter on this that just came out in Person-Centered Management, where I was basically asking, what's going on? What's going on in your life? Just so I would get the sense of who who they were as the person. What do you like about your job? What do you not like about your job? What do you want to be working on? And then what can I do better as a manager? And when I first started holding these meetings, they did not go very well. I was taking over from, some bad management, and people didn't want to talk because they were afraid I would retaliate. But eventually they got to learn that in these meetings, they're just catch-ups. It is a chance for me to try to pair skills with what people want to be doing and a place to identify where we needed further resources. But it also gave me a chance to get feedback on, okay, how am I doing? So sometimes it simply comes down to this conversation. Sometimes, again, people are just obtuse and they have no idea. And so it depends on this manager. Are they type that would be receptive to feedback, or are they type that's going to be defensive? If they're receptive, just have a conversation. If they're defensive, this is where you might need to do the workaround and have that skip level meeting with either their supervisor or HR, depending on your organization. And I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you. We are out of time. So again, Megan, I want to thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon and sharing your insight and sharing your resources. I know people out there found it helpful. And again, thank you to all of you who participated with us today. We have one more session coming up in the management track that will begin in a half hour at 2:30. We're going to be talking about ways on getting employees back on track. So hopefully I will see some of you there. If not, have a great rest of your day, and so long.
Thank you.